Just a follow-up question, Trooper. If the phone is completely off, or the phone records, AT&T phone records, or any phone records you view, would be able to show any data locations from
The phone's off.
Yeah, if the phone is completely off.
The phone is off, it'll have no connection to the network.
So therefore, you would not be able to see any longitude or latitude coordinates. Is that correct?
Because it has no connection to the network. That's correct.
If I could just ask, before you step away, Mr. Madeira, let me just, if I may, just follow up on that. Is there a distinction between a phone being shut off and a phone being without power?
That
This
is,
is your last answer.
when you say without power, you're saying the phone,
The battery's dead.
that would be a phone is off the network.
All right, that's my, all right, thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Madeira?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rayburn?
Thank you. Briefly, if I may, Your Honor, just to follow up on some of the questions. With regard to, defense counsel asked you about the call will go to the strongest signal. And in this particular case, actually, I'll do it this way. Thank you. Showing you now for the record, which has been what has been marked Exhibit 24. And it's,
Can you sharpen that a bit?
I'm going to try, Your Honor, absolutely.
We should all be technology people by the end of this trial.
Absolutely, Your Honor. I'm trying to get focus. Do you want to run through that? Or you want to listen? Do you mind switching over? I'll just run it through our computer instead. That might take you too long to focus, Your Honor. Okay. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Next one, please. Great, thank you very much. So, and for the record, except this is 24? This is a visual of Exhibit 24 for the record, Your Honor, if I may. So you indicated that a call will go to the strongest signal, or the tower with the strongest signal. What makes something the strongest signal? What type of factors are there?
As I mentioned earlier, environmental factors, the handset itself, different devices have better abilities to communicate to towers. Network usage in the area at the time. The network may send calls to a different tower because it's overloaded on some towers, also known as handoff to a different tower. So there are varying factors.
But in this particular case, what was the closest AT&T cell tower to 9 Plaza Way where Kmart was?
Bridge Street in Fairhaven.
The one that all of these calls are bouncing off of.
Correct.
And the distance again is between the two of them?
Approximately a mile.
And after this call begins on 7/12/2014 at 6:28 p.m., the first call, longer than 40-minute voice call between Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy, does that device, Conrad Roy's device, ever bounce off another cell tower? Whether he's answering or not, does it ever bounce off another cell tower?
No, it does not.
If you go to the next page. And what is the last call received there? What's the last call?
8:36 p.m.
So for a period of 240-some-odd minute calls and all of those unanswered calls, does that device ever move from the closest AT&T cell tower to another cell tower?
No, ma'am.
Now, counsel asked you about whether or not a ping, you did a ping, and I'm using the short-term version of it.
Correct.
What's a ping?
Ping is a network-generated event. It's used many times to locate a handset. It can be used by law enforcement authorities to try to find a victim, or in many cases, it's also used to determine if a phone is on, for cases of trying to identify somebody.
And when does that need to be done in relation to, you're looking for somebody and you want to ping their phone, when does that have to be done?
It needs to be done in real time.
What does that mean in real time?
The phone needs to be on, and investigators would have to have an idea of a request to ping that device. The network's not going to ping a device for the sake of pinging a device.
And can you just do that, or you can, based on being a trooper in your training experience, can you just say, you know what, right now, I want to ping a phone?
No, you cannot.
What type of, what do you need to do? What needs to be established?
You need to have an exigency as defined by the carriers. Most of the times it's a life and death situation, or you're trying to locate somebody who's lost.
And have you ever used a ping?
Yes, ma'am.
And when are you using them in real time, in your training experience?
When you're trying to locate somebody who's extremely dangerous to the community, you'll get a ping from back. It's a single ping, most likely from the carrier. It'll tell you the cell tower is in recent connection to, and it'll give you a distance from that cell tower, which is a little more data than you get from cell site location information. You're able to kind of get a range, a much closer meter range distance from where that handset is to a tower.
And have you used such in an ongoing homicide investigation where there's a suspect possibly armed and dangerous that needs to be found?
Yes, ma'am.
And who sets the parameters for what it qualifies as an exigency?
The carriers themselves are the ones who have an exigency definition. You have to explain to them why you have an exigency, and they're the ones who determine if your exigency exists.
And at that time, does the phone still have to be on?
Yes, it does.
And does the exigency still have to exist, meaning you still don't know where the person is?
Yes, it does.
Now, counsel asked you whether or not the records, the CSL records, are used for just billing purposes. And you said that no, it's used by such carriers as AT&T for other uses. Based on your training experience, how else do they use them?
They're not keeping it just so that law enforcement can get access to them, if that's your question. The network engineers go back historically and look at tower usages during certain peak times so that they can better adjust their antennas, so they can better adjust the sectors that they cover, so that they can have, just like us, they all have parameters to hit. They don't want to have drop calls in their coverage area, so they're constantly reviewing their historical data to improve their network.
I just have one more moment, Your Honor. Thank you. And then after a call, after a phone, say it, as the judge asked you, is dead, the battery dies, are you ever going to, and it is never turned back on again, are you going to have any cell tower or any information about the whereabouts of that phone?
No.
No more questions. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Is there anything?
Yes, just a couple quick follow-ups, Your Honor.
Yes, of course.
So, again, the cell site only, CSLI can only determine the strongest signal based on where the strongest signal of the phone pinging off bouncing off the particular cell site tower, correct?
The tower that the device connects to is what is recorded by the network, whether it's most of the time going to seek out the strongest signal, yes.
Okay. So there's no way fair to say there's no way to determine if if the handset is moving within the general area of the cell site tower. There's no way to specifically determine within that general area where the handset or cell phone is. Isn't that correct?
You can break it down into the three sectors. In the data that's provided here, all the corresponding calls and data at the end all fall into one sector. Normal times when you see a device maybe driven around, if they were to physically drive around a cell tower, you would see that device move from sector to sector along the coverage area of that single cell tower.
But if the handset was located within a moving vehicle and was driving around, say, the Kmart Plaza and going to other commercial buildings, the cell site within the very near vicinity, say, just down the road, that the cell site, the CSLI would not be able to determine which specific commercial building or that it was located at. Is that fair to say?
I guess I don't understand your question.
What I'm asking you, Trooper, is the CSLI data cannot determine the movements within the general area close to where the cell site tower is located. Isn't that fair?
You're saying if the handset moved 5 feet to its left and right, would it change?
5 feet, half a mile? Let's use that.
In some cases, no. In some cases, yes. It may change towers.
Okay, so it depends.
It does.
Okay. And just to be clear, the Assistant District Attorney asked you about the phone call at 6:28 p.m. on July 12, 2014.
Yes, sir.
Just because that was an outgoing call from Conrad Roy, wasn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is that?
I am. Thank you very much, Trooper.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you for your assistance in this case. You are free to go.
Thank you, Rob.
Did the Commonwealth have a further witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Farrell Sandler.
All right. Please call that individual. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please remain standing for a moment while you are sworn.
Please raise your right hand. Swear before the court, swear testimony about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, please take a seat. It's so important that you keep your voice up nice and loud and direct your comments into that flat mic in front of you. When you are settled and comfortable, please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Dr. Farrell Sandler, full name spelled first name F like Frank, A-R-Y-L, last name Sandler, S-A-N-D-L-E-R.
All right, you may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
What is your occupation?
I am a medical examiner for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
And are you currently working at the Chief Medical Examiner's office in Boston?
I am.
And how long have you been employed with that office?
I have been employed since 1999,
So that's in excess of 17 years?
approximately, yes.
And what is a medical examiner?
A medical examiner is also known as a forensic pathologist.
And what is pathology, please?
Pathology is the scientific medical study of disease in the most general term way of saying it.
And could you please describe the nature of forensic pathology?
So forensic pathology is a subspecialty of general pathology, and it is the science, the medical science of recognizing and interpreting diseases and injuries in the human body following death.
And does that also entail testifying in courts and providing that type of information in a legal setting?
It does.
And could you please describe for us your educational background?
Yes. I received a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience at Brown University in 1990. Following that, I attended Tufts University School of Medicine, where I received my medical degree in 1994. Following that, I attended Harvard for my residency in both anatomic and clinical pathology, where I then stayed on for an additional year as co-chief resident in anatomic and clinical pathology. Following that, I did my fellowship in forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Boston.
And in your career, the total number of autopsies, how many would you estimate you have performed?
Well over 1,000.
And have you had opportunities to testify in your capacity as a medical examiner in courts of the Commonwealth?
I have.
In what particular courts?
Probably most of the superior courts in Massachusetts. I don't have an exact number.
And I mentioned the word autopsy. Doctor, could you tell us what is an autopsy?
Yes, an autopsy is a surgical procedure that is performed on a deceased individual. The main reason for doing one is to determine the cause and manner of death.
And are autopsies done in all deaths in Massachusetts?
No.
What are the requirements, or what are some of the standards, procedure, and protocol with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in determining whether or not an autopsy will be done?
To start more broadly, there are certain criteria of which deaths in the Commonwealth need to be reported to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Examples are anybody who dies outside of a hospital, anyone who dies of an unnatural death. There's a list of criteria of deaths that need to be reported to us. And then once the deaths are reported to us, then we determine whether or not we want to take jurisdiction over that case. So a sudden and unnatural death, we would decide to take jurisdiction over the case.
So once something, although it might be reported, the chief medical examiner's office might not perform an autopsy?
So, for example, if an elderly person passes away at home, but they may not have a primary care doctor to sign their death certificate, then we would take jurisdiction of that case so that a death certificate can be generated. And for example, in a case like that, in a situation like that, we would accept jurisdiction, but we would not do an autopsy. So we do not do autopsies on all of the cases that we accept jurisdiction over.
And what about in the instances of suspected suicide? Do you do, or does the office do, as a normal protocol, autopsies on those particular deaths?
So all suicides we would accept jurisdiction over because that's an unnatural death. And then once we accept jurisdiction over a suicide, sometimes we may just do an external examination, and sometimes we might do an autopsy. If the suicide occurred in a public place, then we would most likely do an autopsy.
You just mentioned the term external exam. In an autopsy, are there different types of exams that you do?
So in our examination of a deceased, there are some cases where we don't perform an actual autopsy, where we just do an external examination of the body, and we are always looking for any signs of natural disease processes or any signs of injury. And if we see something on the external examination that would make us suspicious of an unnatural death, for example, in the elderly person I was describing, that we would accept jurisdiction if there was no doctor, we would most likely just do an external examination. But if we saw something that made us suspicious, we would then proceed to an autopsy.
And the autopsy is different than the external exam because it includes an internal exam.
Correct.
I'm going to draw your attention, Doctor, to July 14th of 2014. Did you have an occasion to perform an autopsy?
I did.
And where was that autopsy performed?
At the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, which is in Boston on Albany Street.
And in performing that autopsy, did you follow the procedures that you just laid out for us?
I did.
And initially, when the decedent arrives, are they identified for you?
Yes, we receive when a case gets called into our office, whether it be from a doctor at the hospital or whether it be from a police officer, when that case gets called into us, there's a case intake form that is generated, and then the doctor who is assigned that case would receive that case intake form as part of the chart.
And in this particular case, on the 14th of July, who were you performing an autopsy on?
On Conrad Roy, sorry.
And did you learn his age?
I did.
How old was he?
18.
Can you describe general appearance at that time of his body, his height and weight?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What was his height and weight?
It's okay, I'm going to refer to my report.
Your Honor, make sure you refer to a report.
If your memory is exhausted, Doctor, you may refer to that which might refresh your memory. Please just tell us, however, what you were looking at.
This is the autopsy report that I generated following the autopsy.
Thank you. You may review that to yourself. Don't read from it.
So the deceased in this case was 70 inches in length, approximately, and weighed approximately 151 pounds.
You had mentioned that with the body of Mr. Roy comes a death notification report, true?
Correct.
And what information did you know about the circumstances in which he was found?
So there is a portion of the case intake sheet that tells the circumstances of death.
And in this particular case, what information did you have about the circumstances of Mr. Roy's death?
The information that I had was that the deceased was found in a truck with the windows all rolled up in a parking lot with a gasoline water pump in the car.
And in getting that information, is the fact that there was a gasoline water pump contained, is that important in your evaluation of what testing you're going to do in this particular autopsy?
I would approach the autopsy the same
Okay.
in any case.
And after taking note of Mr. Roy's general appearance, did you have occasion to observe any evidence or injury to his body?
Yes.
If you could tell us what you particularly saw.
Okay. So again, as part of the autopsy, we start with an external examination. We note any injuries we see. We note general characteristics, hair color, eye color, height, weight, like I just reported, and any injuries. In this case, the deceased did have some small abrasions to the right side of the forehead. There were linear and multiple.
I'm going to ask you, Doctor, if you could look to the screen. We're going to put up a photograph and ask if you...
Can I see counsel sidebar with those photographs?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Mr. Flynn, thank you.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Doctor, I'm going to show you a photograph. I'm going to ask you if you can describe what you're seeing here, and if that is a fair and accurate depiction of how you saw Mr. Roy when you were doing the exam of him.
Yes, this is a photograph of the face of the deceased in the autopsy room on the autopsy table.
And you had mentioned that you saw some linear scrapes or abrasions on his forehead, or what side of his forehead?
The right side.
And are those depicted in that photograph?
They are.
And Doctor, in your training experience, could you tell us what mechanism or what causes an abrasion? What is an abrasion?
So an abrasion, in layman's term, might be called a scrape. It is caused by injury to the superficial layers of the skin, and that can be caused from friction with a rough object, or it can be caused by compression, but it's injury to the superficial epithelial layers of the skin.
And in this particular case, are you able to give an opinion as to how those abrasions occurred on Mr. Roy's head?
No.
Were there any other injuries that you noted to his face or his body at that time?
There was on the bridge of the nose what we call a drying artifact. It can sort of look like an abrasion, but it's a postmortem finding. When somebody is leaning against something or something is leaning against them, you can get a sort of drying artifact like that, or you can get it when nothing is leaning on it. Sort of.
So when you say post-mortem, that means after death?
Yes, sorry.
Could something, for instance, like sunglasses cause that type of, if someone was wearing sunglasses at the time?
Yes.
Did you make any other observations to his body?
Again, I noted all the general characteristics, and then there are postmortem changes to the body that we also note.
And what are those, please?
So postmortem changes in particular that we look at are something called rigor mortis and something called liver mortis, or lividities.
Let's start with rigor mortis, please. What can you tell us? What is rigor mortis?
Rigor mortis is the stiffening of the body that you see following death, that is due to the disappearance of ATP from muscle, which is sort of the main energy source for muscles is ATP. So it's the disappearance of that which causes rigor mortis, which is this stiffening of the body. It is a action that takes some time to develop. It starts slowly, and in average conditions, it develops over a period of 8 to 12 hours, and of course this varies considerably, and then it stays for a period of time, and then in average conditions it disappears by 36 hours, and then you're left with no rigidity anymore. And again, there's a lot of variables but those are
And when you say
averages.
average conditions, are there these variables that you mentioned? Can heat or temperature be a variable that can change the hours to go from lividity to then staying in the lividity and then coming out of lividity?
You mean,
I'm sorry, rigor mortis. I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. Yes, absolutely.
what-
Temperature is a major factor that can change those values, and it would accelerate.
So if it's a hot temperature, or if someone's in a hot car, that can increase when they come out of
Rigor mortis. Yes.
When you examined Mr. Roy, was he in rigor?
He was not.
You also mentioned liver mortis or lividity. Could you please tell us what that is?
So lividity is the red-purple discoloration that you would see in the skin following death, which is due to settling of the blood by gravitational forces in the now toneless dilated capillaries. So the blood will start to settle due to gravity, and that will show up in the dependent areas of the body. In other words, if somebody passes away and they're on their back, you will see this discoloration on their back. And then you will see within that areas of pallor where if somebody passed away on their back and there is anything leaning against them, a stone, a belt or a bra strap, you'll have areas of pallor there where the blood is sort of compressed out of the blood vessels entirely.
Is it true then that both rigor and lividity are more accurate in determining whether a body has been moved than they are in when a person might have died?
Yes, given the amount of variables that can change the timing of when lividity becomes fixed, which I didn't quite get into, but and when rigor mortis begins and ends, both of those processes can be accelerated by heat and are very variable in general.
And because of that, because they're so variable, is it true that you do not ever put down a time of death on your death certificates?
That is correct. We do not, there's no reliable way to accurately determine time of death.
Getting back to lividity or liver mortis, you said it's normally a reddish purplish color.
Yes.
In your examination of Mr. Roy, what was the lividity you observed in his body?
So in his case, I described the lividity as cherry red.
And does that have significance to you, cherry red?
Yes.
What is that, please?
When, as a forensic pathologist, when we are looking at a deceased, if we see the lividity has a very cherry red color as opposed to the more typical red-purple, that is a signal to us that it could be carbon monoxide poisoning. It could also be cyanide poisoning. So we would look at the circumstances of the death, and given, in this case, the circumstances of the death, it may be very suspicious of carbon monoxide.
And what was it about the circumstances of the death that made you, besides seeing the lividity itself?
So the cherry red lividity, as well as the fact that the deceased was found in a car with a running motor, generator, gas powered in the car with him, and the windows all closed.
And based on that, seeing the cherry red and the circumstances, did you order additional testing for Mr. Roy?
I did. We do draw toxicology on all of the autopsies that we do, and but in this case, we look for drugs of abuse normally, and in this case, I asked for them to run additional testing for carbon monoxide.
And what is carbon monoxide?
Carbon monoxide is a odorless gas, which is formed which is found in the fumes of fuels that contain carbon. So it's found in the fumes. So fuels that contain carbon would be wood, gas, coal.
And is it normal to find carbon CO in someone's blood?
Yes, you can find small amounts of CO or carbon monoxide in everyone.
And what would be the percentage of a normal person, the carbon monoxide in a normal or healthy person?
A normal, healthy person walking around who's not a smoker and would have a carbon monoxide level of approximately 1 to 3%.
And you mentioned smokers. Do they have an elevated carbon monoxide level?
They do.
What would that be normally? Or generally?
Smokers can have up to 3 to 5%. Sometimes they say you can see up to 13% carbon monoxide in a smoker.
And having elevated carbon monoxide in your blood, why is that a bad thing?
Well, it can become lethal if it reaches a certain level.
And why is that? What is it about the carbon monoxide? How does it react in the blood?
So carbon monoxide acts like a competitively with oxygen for the binding sites on a blood protein called hemoglobin. So, and interestingly enough, the hemoglobin will preferentially bind carbon monoxide rather than oxygen. So it has an affinity of actually, I think it's 250 times more of an affinity towards carbon monoxide than it has for oxygen. So if the binding sites are all taken up by carbon monoxide, then the oxygen won't be on the hemoglobin and it won't be able to be carried in the blood to deliver the oxygen to the tissues.
So essentially, you're suffocating.
That's correct.
And in this particular, well, let me ask you this. What is carboxyhemoglobin?
So carboxyhemoglobin is what is measured, and it is the protein of the hemoglobin with the carbon monoxide attached to it, hence the carboxyhemoglobin. And that's what is tested to see what the percentage of carbon monoxide in the blood is.
And in this particular case, you requested additional testing on some blood samples to find out what that level of carboxyhemoglobin would be in Mr. Roy. Is that true?
That is correct.
And if you could tell us what samples of blood are collected.
Okay, so in this case, I collected femoral blood, heart blood, urine, vitreous fluid, gastric contents, and then I took additional blood for the carbon monoxide in a purple top tube and additional tube in another purple top for DNA testing if it was ever needed.
And is that sent off to a different lab, a toxicology lab?
Yes.
And then do you await the results before you come to any conclusions about the manner or the cause of death?
Yes.
I believe that was the first number I was into by stipulation, correct?
I'm going to, Your Honor, if I may, can I put on exhibit number
Yes,
1?
you may.
Doctor, is this the actual postmortem toxicology report that you reviewed in this particular case?
It is.
And just going through the detailed findings, it appears that there is none of these items that are detective until you get down to item, well, let's go first, 1-1-404, pooled cavity blood. Is there a reading for carboxyhemoglobin?
Yes, so first they would screen it, and looks like it was screened and it was positive, and they would go ahead then and measure it.
And in this case, the percentage of carboxyhemoglobin was what?
71%.
And you had mentioned earlier in your testimony that carbon monoxide levels can get to be lethal.
Mhm.
In your training experience, what is a lethal, or when does the level of carbon monoxide become lethal in the human body?
The literature varies, but definitely 60 up to 60% leads to unconsciousness, and 71% would absolutely be lethal.
And there's also
Sorry,
a,
60% leads to unconsciousness, what was the latter part of your answer?
And 70% would absolutely be lethal.
Okay, thank you.
now there also appears to be another area in which there was a positive screening, and that's in organic bases and neutrals. Can you tell us how to pronounce that and what those things are?
So it looks like the toxicology lab picked up diphenhydramine and citalopram and metabolites of citalopram.
And what is tetrahydramine?
Diphenhydramine, it's an antihistamine. It's seen in allergy medications, and some people use it like something like Benadryl for to help with sleeping, things like that.
And citalopram, is that something like Celexa or Lexapro?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about the 71% level of carboxyhemoglobin, please. You mentioned that that's a fatal level.
Yes.
And when would a person start feeling the effects of that in their body?
At what percentage you mean, or
Yes.
what, or time?
Foundation, which is an expert on carbon monoxide.
Overruled? You may answer, ma'am.
So at about, so there, you have differing levels, and it's, this is just what's in the literature, but you would start to see, like I said, at 60%, you'd become unconscious. Lower levels, you'd start to become dizzy, confused, somnolent.
And would there be any type of coughing or retching that could occur as your levels are getting higher?
So according to the literature, if one was breathing in a very heavily air that was very heavily infused with carbon monoxide, there is literature out there that at about 1 to 2 minutes, one would start coughing.
I'm sorry, what?
1 to 2 minutes
1 to 2 minutes.
of
Okay,
breathing
thank you.
in, that one would start coughing.
And how would it progress?
And then the coughing would become more and more severe, and then would lead to severe coughing and retching. They say at about 5 minutes, 6 minutes. By about 13 minutes, the literature says one would become unconscious.
We're not- So, I'm going to ask you, according to my notes anyway, and certainly this is not the record. You had indicated that at 1 to 2 minutes, someone would submit Flynn's question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And by about 13 minutes, these are estimations, obviously, unconsciousness. And then what would happen is the respiratory rate would get slower and slower. So by about 17 minutes, there might be 3 breaths in a minute. And by approximately 20 minutes, there would be no more breaths. Death,
So death at 20 minutes.
approximately.
Doctor, can you tell us in your role as a pathologist, what is decomposition?
In the general term, it's breakdown of the body tissues following death.
And in this case with Mr. Roy, did you note any areas of decomposition on his body?
I did.
And where was that, please?
There was a green discoloration noted on the right side of his lower abdomen.
And what causes that green discoloration, please?
So the bacteria that are normally present in the intestines, when following death, they're allowed to able to reproduce greatly because nothing is keeping them in check. And so that green discoloration that is not uncommonly seen in the abdomen over a period of time following death, you'll see that, particularly in that area, because the intestines are very close to the surface of the skin there in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. So, like I said, literature says you will see that by 36 hours in normal temperate conditions. And I saw that in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen.
And again, can elements such as heat increase that 36
Yes.
to a lower number?
The heat would accelerate decomposition. So that would, accelerating decomposition would make that green discoloration present earlier.
So
Can I
from,
interrupt for 1 second, please? Doctor, you've made some time references here to the green discoloration, some other things. You said you did the autopsy on July 14th, is that correct?
That's correct.
At what time did you do that autopsy?
I don't have the exact time written, but usually I start autopsies around 11 a.m. And before that, the bodies are stored in a cooler, which is kept at a temperature that is aimed at stopping the decomposition process.
and is that, may I approach, Your Honor? Doctor, I'm going to show you a photograph and ask you if you recognize that as the condition of the body as you saw it during the autopsy.
I do.
And if you could just describe what we're actually seeing in this abdomen portion of Mr. Roy's body.
So again, this is picture of the abdomen in the deceased on the autopsy table. And here you can see the cherry red lividity that I was speaking about earlier. You can see it here in the dependent area. Given gravity, if one is sitting up, that lower abdomen would be the dependent area. You can see the color is somewhat what we would call cherry red. And then you can also see an area of pallor here within the cherry red in two different areas.
What is that consistent with?
That's consistent with something leaning against the deceased. The lower line would most likely be a belt or underwear, elastic.
If someone was sitting down in a seat and their legs were bent in that area, would that create that pallor?
That could create that, or leaning over. Again, this other line of pallor could be from leaning over, it could be from something pressing on the deceased in that area. I can't say what's causing that.
And do you also
Oh, and
note another discoloration in that photograph?
Yes, I see the green discoloration on the lower end of the photograph on the right side of the deceased that I was discussing.
Your Honor, I'd ask those two photographs that we've referenced in the testimony of the doctor be the next exhibits, please.
Is there an objection to their admission? No. They shall be impounded at this time, they should be impounded and kept in separate envelope, please, but of course they are admitted now. Thank you.
And doctor, based on your examination and the testimony you provided today, do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as the cause of death of Mr. Roy?
I do.
What is that, please?
Acute carbon monoxide intoxication.
And as a medical examiner, when you complete your autopsy, do you do what's known as a death certificate?
I do.
Did you do that in this particular case?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Doctor, is this the death certificate of Mr. Conrad Roy III?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move to introduce that as the next
Is there
exhibit.
an objection? No, Marked as the next exhibit, please.
Number 26, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fellow? Good morning to you, sir. You may proceed when you are ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Doctor. How are
Good
you?
morning.
Doctor, when you did the autopsy, you did not find any evidence of any pills within the body of Conrad Roy, did you?
I did not see any pills in the gastric contents, but the toxicology did show the medications we spoke about earlier.
Okay, and one of those medications that was found was citalopram?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's an antidepressant?
Correct.
Okay. And the manner of death which you opined was a suicide?
I did not speak about the manner of death previously. I spoke of the cause of death.
Was a suicide?
No, the cause and manner of death are two different things.
Okay, but the death certificate, you prepared a death certificate,
Yes.
didn't you?
Yes,
And,
and I did note the manner, but you said that I referred to earlier. I didn't refer to the manner. I referred to the cause of death.
okay, in the manner of death?
Yes, I marked that as suicide.
Okay. And there was also a box that you could have marked a homicide?
Correct.
Rule.
And given the nature of your autopsy and everything that you performed, you could not establish a time of death, could you?
That's correct.
And there were no narcotics found within Conrad Roy in the toxicology report?
Correct.
And now the carbon monoxide, is it, you spoke to carbon monoxide in literature that you've reviewed, is that right?
That's correct.
Would it be fair to say that you are not an expert in carbon monoxide poisoning?
I'm not sure how to define that, but as part of, it is something that we, as medical examiners, need to be very familiar with because of both the accidental nature that comes up in it and suicidal nature and other things. So, but
Is it fair to say you've probably seen hundreds of suicides by carbon monoxide?
I don't know the exact number, but I would say certainly over 50.
And that is a method of suicide that you see frequently, is it fair to say?
Yes.
In the saturation levels, if you know, within the environment of carbon monoxide becomes important of how quickly a person would be overcome by the carbon monoxide?
Correct.
Okay, so in other words, if the levels in the environment the person is in are low levels of carbon monoxide, it will take longer for a person to become incapacitated.
Correct.
All right. So when you gave a timeline a few minutes ago to the court of how long it would take before a person would become incapacitated, you were just generally speaking?
I was referring to a study in the literature where it was a situation very similar to this situation where a individual had attached a hose to their exhaust pipe, put it in the car with the windows up, and happened to have been tape recording the entire episode. So that's where those numbers and timing, and again, it would be a high saturation of carbon monoxide like this one.
And so the study that you're, or not the study, but the suicide that you're speaking of where there was a tailpipe used, that was not the case here, to the best of your understanding.
Correct.
And the tailpipe that was used in that particular study that you're looking at, do you know what kind of engine it was using?
Nope, just that it was a
automobile.
combustion automobile engine.
Do you know in that study whether or not it was a pickup truck versus a SUV versus an ordinary sedan?
No, I don't.
And in this particular instance, you don't know if any windows were open in the truck that Conrad Roy was found in?
I have to refer to the circumstance.
Do you have any personal knowledge of whether or not any windows were open?
I was not there, but I would have the report when the police officer called it in, which would be under the circumstances of the death. And
But that report would only indicate, wouldn't it be fair to say, of what the police observed themselves when they found the...
yes, that's correct.
All right. So if a person was sitting in a car and had a back window open, even though they had some device generating carbon monoxide, it would take longer for that person to become incapacitated.
The saturation in the car, if a window was down, would be less than if the window was up, because
So-
the outside air could mix in.
So whatever the device or mechanism producing the carbon monoxide, it would be important to find out what its output of carbon monoxide would be. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Really, what is most important is the saturation in the blood, because
And that's most
That-
important to determine if the person died from carbon monoxide.
correct. So that
But
would
in
be what
terms of
my job is to cause and manner of death. So for me, for the cause of death, regardless of how much carbon monoxide was being produced, it would be how much carbon monoxide was in the blood, which is what I would be interested in.
Right, and I'm not challenging you on that, Doctor. What I'm saying is on the timeline, however, where you said a person would become incapacitated after a certain length of time, that was based on a piece of literature that you read that talked about how long it would take if a person had a hose with piped-in carbon monoxide from the engine generated from that particular automobile.
Correct.
All right, so you don't know in particular what a portable generator, its output of carbon monoxide is, do you?
Correct.
And you don't know what the output of a water pump would be of carbon monoxide,
Correct. I
So they
assume
could-
somebody could determine that, but I don't know.
but you personally don't know.
That's
And
correct.
is it fair to say that you don't feel qualified to actually opine what a generator puts out for carbon monoxide?
That's correct.
So this timeline level, just to make sure about a person going unconscious, depends upon the saturation level within the automobile.
Correct.
And so, for instance, you said, I think it would take, did you say 15 minutes in that piece of literature that you reviewed?
In the case that I was discussing, which had, similarities to this case, it was.
No similarities? When you say similarities, you're
Being,
talking about a pipe in.
I'm
from the-
talking about,
And the record will not be good if you're both talking at the same time. So why don't we let Mr. Cataldo
Sure.
finish? Go ahead. sir.
Thank you. So when you say similarities, you're talking about a hose being pumped in from an automobile's engine. And you're saying that is similar in nature to being told that there was a water pump in Conrad Roy's truck found.
yes, I mean, the similarities being that carbon monoxide is being produced and brought in one case, pumped into the car, and the other just being produced in the car with enclosed space. So there's similarities. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. So those numbers that I gave previously were from this other case that I talked about.
Okay. And so if there is ventilation brought in to the interior of an automobile, even if there's carbon monoxide in the air, that makes a difference in your timeline.
Correct.
Right? And if a door is opened and fresh air is brought in, that makes a difference in the timeline.
Correct.
And if a person gets out of the automobile, that makes a difference.
Correct.
And
And
the length of time that they may be standing outside the automobile makes a difference.
correct.
And if they go for a walk and their heart level begins to beat faster, would that make a difference?
Yes, any time spent outside of the carbon monoxide will decrease the carbon monoxide in the air.
And other than your education and training to determine that carbon monoxide levels, when they become lethal, and I think you said 70%?
70% would definitely be lethal.
Okay.
Most people would say less than that.
Okay. And, but you say 70%.
Is definitely lethal, no question about it.
And so your training and experience is on the lethality of when the carbon monoxide in somebody's system would kill them.
Correct.
And your training and experience isn't, however, on this timeline that you set out. That's just a piece of literature that you've reviewed.
Which is part of my training. It's in the forensic pathology textbooks.
And on that, there was one study about how long in that particular cab of that
Correct.
literature. That's it.
Correct.
And in that piece of literature, did it say whether or not any air, oxygen from outside the cab was brought in to that individual?
No, in this case, it did mention that the windows were closed, so the timeline would be accelerated where it was enclosed with carbon monoxide, as opposed to if you introduce more air, then you're decreasing the carbon monoxide, and that would prolong the process.
Yeah. One moment, please, Your Honor. Now, at some point in your duties in examining Conrad Roy, you did a DNA sample?
Sustained. We don't need to talk about it. The objection is sustained.
You know, I'd like to be heard on that.
Come on.
One more. And now, doctor, in performing the autopsy, you do a external examination,
Yes,
and you determine some abrasions on his Conrad Roy's forehead,
correct.
and there were several of them.
Yes.
Okay, and were they consistent with a fight?
They could be consistent with a fight, they could
To
be,
be consistent, did you say?
they could be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Doctor, you may step down. Thank you for your assistance in this case.
Thank you.
We will take the morning recess and we'll resume at 11 a.m. Thank you very much.
All rise.
Sergeant Michael Bates, please.
Okay.
Trying to, I don't know if now's the time or before the Commonwealth rest, I do want to be heard on, to follow up on the journals that I had laid a foundation with Camden Roy previously.
This is the notebooks? that
The
were-
notebooks, yes.
Well, I'll hear you now if you
Oh,
like.
thank you, yes.
You want a sidebar?
I
or-
think- Okay, sure,
All right, come on.
okay.
Is Michael Bates, B-A-T-E-S.
All right, you may proceed, Ms. Rayburn.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Where do you work?
I am a sergeant with Massachusetts State Police,
And how long have you been with the state police in total?
25 years.
Can you walk us through your sort of assignments? Were you a road trooper for a period of time?
That's correct. For about 9 years, I performed normal, uniformed state police duties.
Did you join the Bristol County District Attorney's State Police, what used to be known as CPAC?
Yes, I did.
And when did you first join CPAC?
The year 2000,
And what did you do then?
I was assigned to the narcotics unit.
What did you do for the narcotics unit?
Various drug investigations throughout Bristol County.
And have you also worked on what is sometimes referred to as the body side of the CPAC unit, the homicide unit?
Yes, I have.
And how long have you worked in the homicide unit?
3 years,
And when did you become a sergeant?
2 years ago.
Now, in addition to the regular training you would have received as a trooper, have you had any specialized training dealing with phones and electronics?
Yes, I have.
Could you please explain your experience in training to the judge?
Certainly. I've been trained in basic and advanced smartphone forensics, as well as computer forensics.
And what is a smartphone?
A smartphone is basically a phone that allows you to access the internet. It's a computer in your pocket.
And are you familiar with something called Celebrite?
Yes, I am.
What is Celebrite?
Celebrate is the main forensic tool that we use to perform extractions on cell phones.
And are there other databases? Another one is Lantern.
That's correct.
And what type of training and experience do you have with Celebrite?
I am certified in Celebrate in both basic and advanced smartphone investigations.
And what does that mean?
It allows me to use the Celebrate software and hardware to examine, extract pretty much any electronic devices that are supported by Celebrate.
Now, how do you download or dump a phone?
The system we use most often is Celebrate. So Celebrate allows you to look up the certain model phone you have, connect it to the software and/or hardware by means of a cable, and then perform different types of extractions of the data out of the phone.
Now, are there certain times where the password of the phone might be needed to download a phone?
That's correct.
Now, whether you don't need the password or whether you need it and you have it, once you have the phone and it's open and charged up, can you then connect the phone to the Celebrite machine and extract information off the phone?
Yes.
And are there different types of searches you're able to do on different types of phones?
Yes, there are.
And an iPhone, which is a smartphone, correct?
Correct.
Can you extract types of data from, for example, an iPhone?
Yes.
Can you tell the court what types of data you can get from someone's smartphone or iPhone?
Sure. From a smartphone, you get pictures, contact lists, calls, internet searches, internet sites visited.
And are you able to get, oftentimes, messages?
That's correct.
And are there different, when you actually extract the information, differentiate between group and MMS messages for single source or SMS messages?
That's correct.
And how will the report actually
The report is generated by the Celebrate software itself, about the data which was extracted, and it can be generated in many different forms.
at some point, can you isolate different people? For example, a conversation between Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy. Could you isolate contact with each other?
Yes, you can.
And using that software, can you generate what's called a timeline? Meaning start from a particular day, for example, July 9th, 2014, and go through all the activity on that phone, text messages, searches, phone calls, until an end date and time.
That's correct.
Now, fair to say that depending on the phone and depending on the data, that could be, some of the reports could be thousands or over 10,000 pages long.
That is correct.
Now, with the different types of extractions on the Celebrite system, are you able to, depending on what type of extraction you use, get deleted text messages?
Yes,
And could you tell the court how you're able to get deleted information off of a phone?
certainly. Celebrate offers three different types of extractions. One being illogical extraction, which I like to assimilate to if you had the phone read on the phone, you would be able to extract logically and look at in a report format. Then there's the file system extraction, which does the same as the illogical, but it adds in there files from the live running system or the file system area. And then the third type is a physical extraction, which does the same as the first two, but it adds in there unallocated space and allocated space, which is like space on a hard drive. So that's where you'll recover deleted information that was once on the phone and then made available to use by other programs, but might still be recoverable if it has not been written over yet.
Now, focusing on, you said that you can also get images in a report.
That's correct.
And does that mean, so if there's images on my phone, does that mean I took that particular picture, or are there other ways that images can end up on my phone?
There are many ways.
How else could an image end up on your phone?
You can take it from your phone. You could have it sent to you by a messenger, by somebody else in an MMS message. You can have it downloaded from the internet. You can do a screenshot of a screen that you see on your phone. You can have images put on your phone if you visit certain websites online.
Now, could you also tell us about what training experience you have relative to computers or examining computers, please?
Certainly. I've been to computer forensics training, and I hold a certification in NCASE. It's called the ENCE, NCASE Certified Examiner.
Say it again?
It's called ENCE, the NCASE Certified Examiner.
And in examining a computer, for example, a laptop, let's use as an example, can you download it in the same manner you can a phone, or is it a different type of examination?
It's a different type of examination.
Could you explain it for the court?
Certainly. With computer forensics, you basically image the hard drive of the evidence you're looking at. So you make a copy of that hard drive, and then there's different software, just like there's different versions for a cell phone, to extract the data and put it in readable format or report format.
And now I'm going to draw your attention to this particular case, Sergeant. In this particular case, did you become involved as well as another trooper who was working at CPAC at the time?
Yes.
And who was the other original trooper who also was extracting information along with you?
Trooper Dan Giosi.
And how long did you work with Trooper Giosi?
On this case or in general?
In general, sorry.
Oh, total of about 10 years.
And just from your observations, was this the type of work that he also did, downloading phones and forensically examining things like computers and phones?
Yes, as a supervisor in the unit, I also supervise our forensic lab, and Dan Giosi is one of the troopers that works underneath me.
And how long have you been working as a supervisor in this forensic lab?
2 years.
How many phones would you say you've extracted in your time?
In my total time,
Yeah.
I average about 200 a year. It's been 4 years, so 800 phones.
Now, in this particular case, at some point, were you asked to extract or analyze a particular phone?
Yes.
And whose phone were you asked to analyze first?
Conrad Roy's.
Could I actually borrow the phones? So don't forget the exhibit number. May I approach the witness with an exhibit? Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm going to show you what's been previously introduced as Exhibit 7. Do you recognize that phone?
Yes, I do.
And is there an evidence sticker on the back that assists you with that?
Yes, there is.
And what do you recognize that phone to be?
This is the phone that I first looked at for Conrad Roy.
And what type of phone is that?
This is an iPhone, Apple iPhone.
Thank you. If you could put the password back on, thank you. Thank you. Now, Sergeant, when you downloaded or extracted Conrad Roy's phone, that iPhone, did you have the password?
Yes, I did.
And did that password unlock the phone for you?
Yes, it did.
So walk us through what you did with his phone initially.
Certainly, the phone is unlocked by means of the password. and it is then made sure it's fully charged, connected to our Celebrate equipment, and then you perform the extraction from that point.
And were you able to successfully extract Conrad Roy's phone?
Yes,
And were you able to do a full physical extraction or a logical extraction or that in-between one?
the iPhones are a little bit different, so it's a logical extraction.
So would that mean would you have been able to pull out any deleted text messages on Conrad Roy's phone?
No.
Now, did you become aware, as being the supervisor at the unit, that there was another phone that at some point later, in October of 2014, that was taken into custody and needed to be downloaded?
Yes, I did.
And whose phone was that?
Michelle Carter.
Did you do the initial extraction on that phone?
Yes, I did.
Can I see that? May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
May?
Thank you. Showing you Exhibit 22. That's 4 different pieces. Did you extract that phone?
Yes, I did.
And could you tell the court what type of phone that is?
This is an LG smartphone.
Thank you. And were you able, at first, strike that, were you able to successfully download the defendant's phone?
Yes.
And at first time, were you able to do a logic,
Just a logical.
and were you later able to do a physical extraction?
Yes, I was.
And what, in doing a physical extraction, are you able to at least retrieve some deleted text messages?
Yes.
Are you able to be sure that you're able to retrieve all of them? Can you ever be sure you got all deleted text messages?
No.
No, I'm sorry, can I add that question again so I understand the answer?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is there any way to be sure that when you do a physical extraction or any type of extraction that you got all deleted text messages?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Where do deleted text messages, where are they stored?
In that unallocated and allocated space, if you picture a hard drive or, say, a box, make it simple, a text message comes in, it stores in memory, and it reserves that section of memory as the text message. When you delete that message, the phone or computer basically deletes the pointer to that message. So the message is still there, it just marks it as being available space for something else to come in and write on top of it, a picture, another text message. So as long as that information has not been written over, you're able to recover some of that deleted data.
So I'm going to come back to the phones in a little bit, sir, but did there also come a time where you asked to examine some computers?
Yes.
And in total, how many computers did you examine?
3 laptops and a desktop computer, 4.
And is it fair to say that one computer came in later than the other computers?
Yes.
And would that be a computer belonging to Conrad Roy's mother?
Yes.
Was there what's maybe best described as a selfie video that was extracted from that particular computer?
Yes, there was.
And without going into the details of it, did you watch that video?
I did.
And could you describe who you can see on it?
Yes.
Who can you see on it?
Conrad Roy.
And based on looking at that video and the data belonging to that video, could you tell when that was recorded by Conrad Roy by the computer?
Yes.
When was that recorded?
Don't have the exact date. I know the actual date is in the title of the file, the name of the file. I don't have it off the
And
top of my head.
I should remember if I told you the name of the file is June 13th, 2014.
That would help me a lot, yes.
And were you able to extract the video off of the computer?
Yes.
And put it onto a CD?
Correct.
Thank you. And did you also examine the other 3 laptops that you received?
Yes, I did.
And I'll come back to those in a little bit, okay? So, back to the phones. So you were able to do an extraction of Conrad Roy's phone and then an extraction of Michelle Carter's phone, is that correct?
Correct.
And in doing so, sir, on both of the phones, were you able to retrieve text messages?
Yes.
And does that include both SMS and multi-source?
Yes.
What was done with the extractions after they were performed, the actual reports? Did they go to anybody?
The reports are generated, they're always provided back to the investigators.
And in this particular case, are you aware of whether or not that was done?
Yes.
And since that time, have you had an opportunity to at least examine portions of the lengthy extraction reports?
Yes, I have.
And to your knowledge, have those extraction reports been made into separate, at times, separate conversations between Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter and others?
That's correct.
As well, are you aware whether or not a timeline was prepared of certain timeframes of all the events on the phone? Text messaging, call logs, things of that nature.
Yes.
So let's talk about those, okay?
Sure.
Time frame, Sergeant, I'm going to start with, and let's talk a little bit about the time frame. Would you agree with me if I said that the extraction report expands well beyond June and July of 2014?
Yes, it does.
And were you able to extract information that went back actually as far as on the defendant's phone, October 7th, 2013, or October of 2013?
That's correct.
And does it end in and around the time the phone was taken, the defendant's extraction report, October of 2014?
That's correct.
So we're talking about a year's worth of data and text messages.
Correct.
So at this point, sir, focusing on the communication between Conrad Roy and the defendant, did it appear that their communication began well before June of 2014?
Correct.
How would you describe their texting? Was it a lot?
It's a fair amount, yes.
Start with June 22nd, 2014, 12:59 p.m. Sorry, do you mind switching over? I apologize, Mr. Cook. Thank you. 12:59? Thank you. Do you see that text message there, 6/22, 2014, 12:59 p.m.?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell from looking at that whether that text message is incoming or outgoing?
It's incoming.
And who is it incoming from?
The number that's stored is Conrad Roy.
And fair to say, this is the defendant's extraction or phone record we're looking at.
Correct.
So this would be a text message from Conrad Roy to the defendant.
That's correct.
And could you read it, please?
Sure. Yeah, I just have to take my time. Like I keep regretting the past, it's getting me upset.
Can you please go up?
Just line for line, sure. Take your life, question mark. You think I should? You're not going to kill yourself. You say all the time you want to, but look, you're still here. All the times you wanted to. You don't want to die. You just want the pain to stop.
Please continue.
That's true.
Counsel,
Yes, Your Honor.
this is a forensics expert.
Yes, Your Honor.
Why is this forensic expert reading to me that which is in the report?
Your Honor, the only way for the Commonwealth to put in its case
Are
for,
you putting these documents in?
Your Honor, they'll be coming in a form, yes, Your Honor.
I'm going to read them.
It may be heard briefly at sidebar, Your
Come
Honor?
on,
Thank
come
you.
on, Yeah.
10/3/14, 10:25 p.m. What does the defendant say? What does the defendant text to Mr. Roy?
Tweet, question mark. I want to be your last one.
Does Conrad reply?
Yes.
What does he say?
I don't want to tweet.
What does she say?
Fine.
What does she say next?
Why though?
What does he say?
What's it going to do?
What does she say?
I just thought it would be nice. It would make happy. I've always wanted a nice shout out from you.
What's a tweet?
A tweet is a 140 character or less message that's sent out on a service called Twitter.
And what does it mean to tag someone in a tweet?
You can tag someone in a tweet who is also on Twitter, and it will alert that person and whoever follows that person on Twitter that there was a message just broadcast about them.
July 4th, 2014, 9:36 a.m. Does Mr. Roy send a text message to the defendant?
Yes.
What does she say? What does he say, excuse me?
Hey, sorry, I just took sleeping pills and fell asleep.
What does the defendant say?
So it didn't work?
What does she say next?
That's such a lie.
What does she say next?
You said you wanted this bad. I knew you weren't going to try hard.
What does she say at 9:45 a.m.?
What?
Stop that.
No.
And what does she say next?
Which one are we at?
9:45:52, excuse me.
9:45. I feel like such an idiot.
What does Conrad say?
Why?
What does she say next?
Because you didn't even do anything. You lied about this whole thing. You said you were going to go to the woods and do it, and you said things that made me feel like maybe you were actually serious. And I poured my heart out to you, thinking this was going to be the last time I talked to you. And then you tell me you took sleeping pills? Wicks, first of all, I know that's a lie, because you already said you wouldn't get enough, and I IDK how you would have got them. I'm just so confused. I thought you really wanted to die, but apparently you don't. I feel played and just stupid.
Does Conrad reply to that?
Yes.
What does he say?
Don't. I found out a new plan, and I'm gonna FO it tonight.
And what does she say?
I don't believe you.
What does she say next?
You're gonna have to prove me wrong, because I just don't think you really want this. You just keeps pushing it off to another night and say you'll do it, but you never do.
What does Conrad say?
Okay.
What does she say?
Okay, what?
And what does he say?
I'll prove you wrong.
Counsel?
I'll move on, Your Honor. Thank you. July 4th, 2014, 10:27 a.m.
Judge, if there's one, just how much have we got?
Well, this is a new date, some 10 days later. Again, granting a little.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please read just that?
See, that's what I mean. You keep pushing it off. You just said you were gonna do it tonight, and now you're saying eventually.
July 4th, 2014, 11:53 a.m.
All right, I'm sorry, you know what, I misread the date. We have been through July 4th sufficiently. If you have another date you'd like to draw my attention to?
Absolutely, Your Honor. I'll keep moving forward into July 12th. July 5th, 2014. 9:20. Text message from the defendant to Conrad Roy. Could you please read it, sir?
Just woke up you? Why do you seem so happy, haha?
And what does he say?
Because tonight's the night.
And what does she say?
You said that last night and the night before.
And what does he say?
Haha, I know, but it has to be tonight. I'll be all alone.
July 5th, 2014, a little bit up, 9:58 a.m. What does she say?
Do you think tonight really is the night you're gonna do it?
And what does he say?
I think.
What does she say?
There's a difference between saying I'm gonna try to commit suicide and I'm going to commit suicide.
And what does he say?
Well, I'm gonna try.
And what does she say?
So you don't want it bad enough. You already know you're gonna fail because a part of you wants to fail.
And on July 5th, 2014 at 2:15 p.m., what does he say to her?
It's just hard, Michelle.
And what does she say?
I know it is.
And at July 5th, July 5th, 2014 at 2:18 p.m., what does he say?
Just to keep thinking about inflicting pain upon yourself when I overdosed. I didn't even research it. I didn't like I was gonna be in that much pain, and I.
And then please go up.
It's scary.
And what does she say at 2:20 PM in response to ending with "it's scary"?
Well, that's why you have to do something quick that will end it without having to worry about the pain.
Fair to say this continues on for July 5th, almost the entire day. Text messages just like this one.
Yes, it does.
Objection, characterization.
Sustained, the answer is stricken.
Thank you. July 5th, 2014, now at night, 10:36 PM, and 12 seconds. What does she text him?
Well, are you going to do it tonight or not?
Does he respond?
Yeah.
What does she say?
Well, it's getting late.
What does she say next?
Let me know when. I don't want to fall asleep.
And next, please.
You have to do it soon, though, if you don't want anyone to find you in the morning.
Then July 5th, 2014, 10:57 PM. What does he say to her?
I don't think I have it in me.
And what does she say?
I knew it.
And it, 10, strike that, July 5th, 2014, 10:59 and 40 seconds. What does she say?
Conrad, stop. Please talk to me.
And what does she say next?
I'm so confused.
And what does he say?
I'm too scared.
And what does he say next?
You're right. I don't have it in me.
And what does she say?
Okay, then don't do it. I thought you wanted to do it. I mean, you bought all the stuff, you researched it, and think about it all the time. You say you want it bad, but if you don't want to do it, then don't. I knew all along you weren't going to do it.
And what does he say?
Just swallowed all of them.
And what does she say?
Prove it.
July 5th, 2014, just a little bit before midnight now, 11:26 and 51 seconds. What does she say to him?
Is that even Tylenol?
What does she say next? What does he say?
Yes, it's the main ingredient.
What does she say?
4,000 milligrams isn't enough.
And what does she say next?
Objection. All right.
Just a couple more, Your Honor, please.
We are 7 days from the time that Mr. Roy passed. So, I'm going to read these. I'm going to put that on the record yet again. I am going to read these, so let's move it along.
Yes, Your Honor. July 6th, Your Honor, if I may. Now, after midnight, 12:26 a.m. Please read that.
If you want to do this, 10 Benadryls and then wait 10 minutes, then take all the Tylenol.
What does Conrad say?
Okay, that seems like a plan.
And what does she say?
I still don't think you're really going to do this, so you're going to have to prove me wrong.
July 6, 2014, 1:10 a.m. and 8 seconds. What does he say? What does Conrad say to her?
This scares me.
July 6, 2014, 8:34 a.m. and 50 seconds. What does Michelle Carter say to Conrad Roy?
But I'm tired of you not taking this seriously. Like, if you aren't really going to do it, then stop pretending that you are.
July 6, 2014, 11:13 and 16 seconds. What does she say to Conrad?
Hang yourself, jump off a building, stab yourself. IDK. There's lots of ways.
And what does she say next?
I don't think you really want it.
And what does he say?
I just don't want the pain.
And what
All
is
right,
she?
counsel, your point is made.
Thank you. That night, Your Honor, just one on July 6, 2014, 10:05 p.m. Do you have that one? Okay. I'll now move on to July 7th, Your Honor. July 7th, 5:19:08. 5:19 p.m. Next one. What does Conrad Roy text to the defendant on 5:19 p.m. on the 7th?
How was your day?
And what does she say?
When are you doing it?
Same day now, 6:28:16 on July 7th. What does she say?
Stop ignoring the question.
July 7th, 2014, 10 o'clock p.m. What does she say to him?
You aren't going to know unless you try. And if you don't try something, you're just going to get worse and worse. And I don't even think you can get any worse at this point. The longer you wait in fear of it not working, the longer you're going to keep thinking about it and researching it, and it's going to drive you even more insane.
And at 10:18 and 10 seconds, does Conrad say something?
Yes.
What does he say?
I really don't know what to do. Like, I'm afraid of failing and causing way more damage to myself and looking like a fool for the rest of my life. Ugh.
And at 10:29 p.m., what does she say to him?
Because if you don't think about it, you won't think about failing. You'll just do it thinking you'll just do it thinking you'll succeed.
Do you have anything of this witness other than asking him to read these texts to me?
I do, Your Honor, yes.
Let's go to that.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Sir, did you also do an examination of phones? I mean, strike that, computers.
Yes, I did.
And did you examine the defendant's computer?
Yes, I did.
And did you find things of a nature that you provided them to counsel?
Yes, I did.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Could you please tell us what those two items are?
These are two exhibits to my report which I had recovered during the examination of the computer.
And what are they?
Now, which computer is this, Mr. B?
This is the computer of the defendant, Michelle Carter.
Okay.
And what did you find?
This was a Microsoft Word document that was stored in the computer under the computer.
And did you then print out those documents?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I would offer them at this time.
Is there an objection? No. You want to mark collectively or sequentially?
Collectively is fine, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Number 29, Your Honor?
Just have a question. I do have more questions, Your Honor, but if I could approach the court to ask, inquire, before I do that.
You want to approach me?
Yes, please.
Come on up.
Thank you. Your Honor, before I pull up the timeline, just to have him walk us through it, the Commonwealth is introducing all the SMS messages between Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter.
All right, is there an objection? No, Your Honor. Maybe marked.
Number 30, Your Honor?
Now, Sergeant, is this a spreadsheet with some color codes here as to who might be the author of certain, or the caller on certain items?
That's correct.
Okay, can you please continue? Can you, don't read any text messages for me, but tell us what we're looking at.
This is the timeline of events happening on the phone as a result of the extraction that I performed.
And so we have here the date and time on the left-hand corner,
Correct.
and direction, incoming, outgoing.
Correct.
What's next?
The number or the calling party.
There's references up there to things that were contained in the motion in limine.
I'm sorry, I
There are
didn't hear you.
things on, up there, I see names that were referenced in the original motion in limine, Alice. I see it up on the board.
Your Honor, these were all all the text messages are stipulated to and agreed to.
Is that correct? I thought that
Yes.
was my understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
Although you said there was a slight glitch with
Well-
respect to some aspect of this.
Should I take that down to this hashed out, Judge?
Yeah, interrupt me now.
Withdraw
I'm
the
confused. I thought we
What's
stipulated
that?
all the text
You
messages.
withdraw it?
I just saw these are admitted stipulated text messages.
Okay.
They are going into the court.
They will, of
But-
course, be governed by any prior rulings and motions in limine.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, so we can put it back on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.
Is there then refer to the party?
That's correct.
Now, are there names next to phone numbers there?
Yes.
How would a name come associated with a phone number?
That name would have to be input into the user's phone as a contact, stored as a contact.
So if I put Mike Bates in my phone, if someone extracts my phone, any contact with you, would it have your name next to it?
Correct.
And then we have a description. So would that be the contents of the text message?
Correct.
And when it says extraction phone, does that mean, did it come off Michelle Carter's phone versus Conrad Roy's phone?
Correct.
And does this spreadsheet combine the two phones?
Yes, it does.
So we have the extraction from the defendant's phone, the extraction from Conrad's phone, put together to create a timeline of events of their phones during this time frame.
Correct.
And does type then list what the type of data it is? SMS obviously is a text message.
Correct.
Could you just scroll down so we know where we're... Does this continue on, sir?
Yes, it does.
Please go down a little bit more, please. And stop here, so then do we have different types of what extraction? The defendant, again, some of these are from Conrad Roy, is that correct?
Correct.
Commonwealth would offer it, Your Honor.
All right, is there an objection?
No.
Can be marked.
Nothing further?
Thank you very much. Who's cross-examining?
Yes.
Charlie?
Good afternoon, Lisa. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Do you know Stephen Barano?
Yes, I do.
Yes, and you've met him through the course of this trial several
Yes.
times?
Correct.
And can you tell me who he is?
Stephen Barano is one of the forensic examiners from MWV Forensics, a local forensic company.
Okay, and he is the person, to the best of your knowledge, that you turned over the evidence of your extraction reports to?
Correct.
Okay, and you shared the actual devices, the various electronic devices that you have analyzed, you've allowed him to come to your office and actually extract information off of all those?
Correct.
Are there any devices that he did not extract or examine?
No.
And you went through the various text messages a few minutes ago with my sister, and who selected those various items for you to read? Was that yours, or did somebody tell you we're just gonna put you on the witness stand and read them?
No, those are the messages I extracted. She literally called them out as we were sitting here.
Okay, all right. And are you aware in the various text messages, is it fair to say that there are thousands and thousands of text messages, maybe even 10,000 text messages between Conrad Roy and Michelle Carter?
There are a lot of messages, yes.
All right, and can you estimate how many?
I wouldn't like to estimate, no.
Hundreds?
More than hundreds.
In thousands?
Thousands, yes.
Okay. And are you aware of text messages where Michelle Carter asked Conrad Roy to go to McLean Hospital with her?
I don't remember. There are a lot of messages.
But you just read a
Right.
lot of messages. The messages you read, were those from your memory? Or
No.
No, the district attorney put you up there and just pointed them out and you just read them aloud?
Correct.
Okay. And so you're not aware that she asked him to go to McLean Hospital?
I don't recall, no.
Are you aware that Conrad Roy sent Michelle Carter various photographs?
There were photos exchanged, yes.
And my question is, are you aware that Conrad Roy sent to Michelle Carter photographs?
I don't recall exactly, so no.
Okay. Do you recall Conrad Roy sending Michelle Carter photographs of nooses?
No, I don't recall that.
You don't recall that? And
No.
do you recall whether or not Conrad Roy sent to Michelle Carter photographs of guns?
I don't recall.
Do you recall whether or not Conrad Roy sent to Michelle Carter photographs of suicide, pictures of suicide methods?
I don't remember that either, no.
And are you aware of whether or not Conrad Roy sent to Michelle Carter links to sites of how to kill yourself?
I don't recall I remember the search, but I don't recall the links, no.
Okay. When you say the search, what do you mean by the search?
That those items, those terms were searched for on phones.
On Conrad Roy's phone?
I don't remember which phone.
Okay. And are you aware that Conrad Roy sent to Michelle Carter, are you aware that Conrad Roy received from Michelle Carter links to how to get help?
I don't recall.
So my point is, you don't know the full all these text messages of the thousands. You just extracted them and gave them to the district attorney's office.
Correct.
So you're not aware that Conrad Roy asked Michelle Carter to join in a suicide with him, a Romeo and Juliet, are you?
No, I'm not.
And you're not aware that Michelle Carter said to Conrad Roy, "Oh no, fuck, we're not dying."
No.
And you're not aware that Conrad Roy said to Michelle Carter, "So I'm stuck in this deep hole." You're not aware of that, are you?
No.
And you're not aware that she said, "I'm trying my best to dig you out." You're not a... Yes, this is June 29th, 2014.
Thank you.
1:47:29 p.m. I'm trying to do the best to dig you out. You're not aware of that, are you?
No, I'm not.
And you're probably not aware that he said, "I don't want to be dug out."
No.
Are you aware that he said he wanted to kill himself?
No.
I could go on, couldn't I?
You could.
Nothing further of this witness.
Any redirect based on your cross? All right. Cooper, you are free to go. Thank you for your assistance in this case.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a great day. You as well. You have a further witness?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the Commonwealth arrests its case in chief.
Okay. All right. Why don't I... I assume there'll be a motion?
You most certainly will.
If I was to give you 20 minutes, would that be sufficient time to prepare your argument?
Absolutely.
All right, why don't we resume at 12:20? I'll hear the arguments then, and then in all likelihood, we will suspend for the afternoon. But I'll be back at 12:20 for your argument. Thank you very much.
All rise.
this case, and I would like additional time if I may be heard on that, Your Honor.
I hear
I
you
was
on your
not-
request for an extension.
I-
Go ahead.
I-
Is there something else you want to tell me about granting you an extension of time to do this?
I'm asking for an extension of time till tomorrow morning to file a written motion, and all of my legal arguments that need to be presented. I need to touch upon many various legal arguments. I did not frankly think that we would be concluding this, the government would be concluding this case this morning. So I'm asking until tomorrow morning to file a written motion. I know there is voluminous, I'm sure my sister will be pointing this out, is the court will need to review a great deal, some of the content, and it would give the court this weekend to review all that content potentially to make its informed
Planning
decision.
my weekend for you, on the item, Mr. Cataldo?
But that is my request of the court.
Well, Your Honor, most respectfully, I was very clear on who I was calling today. Cell phone, medical examiner now. Clearly, I thought Trooper Bates was gonna take longer than he did, but that being said, even if I'd gone through all the text messages that I had picked out, we'd still be at this point. There was no way I wasn't gonna rest today. If he wants more time, that's fine, Your Honor, but we both wrote appellate briefs already addressing all of the legal issues on this, so and there's an SJC decision, so I would hope that we know the legal issues now, and,
I'm
but
sorry, you're hoping what?
I think that's clear what the legal issues are. I mean, I read the appellate brief by defense, we were both at the SJC when it was argued, and I'm sure we've read each other's briefs in the decision and have been here, so Commonwealth is ready, but
All right, well, it is 12:25, and it is going to take me some time to read the exhibits. So what I'm going to do, and this perhaps will benefit everyone, I will read the exhibits tonight, this afternoon and this evening. I will hear your argument tomorrow. I will then correlate your arguments to the information that I have garnered from the exhibits, and then I will rule tomorrow morning, after I've heard your argument and some time for reflection of your argument. I recognize the need to prepare your argument. I also recognize Ms. Rayburn's position that many of the legal issues have already been somewhat addressed in the earlier Carter decision. So that kind of defines things a little better for all of us. So you, Mr. Cataldo, can I hear your motion at 9 a.m.? I'll hear the rebuttal, and then I will make my decision after some reflection. But you should have witnesses prepared to go forward tomorrow in the event that motion is denied.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right? We'll see you then tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We'll be in recess until that.
Your Honor, may we approach, please?
Yes, come on up.